A billionaire in handcuffs over a $12 bottle of olive oil. What happened next turned a moment of humiliation into a nationwide movement for justice. Amara Cole never sought the spotlight. Despite being one of the most influential tech entrepreneurs in the country, her name rarely made headlines for her personal life. Amara preferred it that way. To her, wealth wasn't a reason to stand out, but a tool to make a difference. Whether it was funding local schools, spearheading cutting-edge research, or providing housing for underserved communities, her work spoke louder than any PR campaign ever could. But on an ordinary Saturday morning in Palo Alto, California, her anonymity became her greatest vulnerability. Amara had decided to run a quick errand herself, something she hadn't done in years. Her team usually took care of her shopping, but today she felt like reconnecting with a slice of normal life. Dressed in a light grey pantsuit, casual yet undeniably elegant, she walked into the supermarket with an air of quiet confidence. There were no bodyguards or assistants trailing her. She didn't even drive her usual Tesla. She had borrowed a modest family car from her assistant just to blend in. At first, everything was refreshingly ordinary. She pushed her cart through the aisles, scanning shelves for fresh produce, snacks, and a few household items. A group of teenagers brushed past her in the snack aisle without a second glance, while an older couple argued over cereal nearby. It was the kind of mundanity she hadn't experienced in years, and she soaked it in like sunlight after a storm. But then, something unexpected happened. As she placed a box of oatmeal into her cart, a piercing alarm blared across the store. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The atmosphere shifted in an instant, like the crackle before a thunderstorm. Amara froze for a moment, instinctively checking her cart, wondering if she had unknowingly triggered the alarm. A uniformed store employee approached her briskly, their face tight with suspicion. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside," they said, their voice sharp enough to cut glass. Amara raised an eyebrow, confused but calm. "Is there a problem?" she asked evenly. The employee pointed to a bottle of olive oil peeking out from the edge of her cart. "You didn't scan that item," they accused, their tone loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people stopped to gawk. Amara frowned. "I haven't even reached the checkout yet," she replied, her voice steady but firm. She gestured toward the self-checkout stations in the distance. "I was planning to scan everything there." But her words didn't seem to matter. The employee had already called for backup. 2 more staff members arrived, their body language radiating authority. One of them muttered something into a walkie-talkie, and moments later, the announcement came. "We're calling the police." Amara blinked, stunned by how quickly the situation was spiraling out of control. The stares from the growing crowd felt heavier now, tinged with judgment and curiosity. She could hear snippets of their whispered conversations, words like suspicious and entitled, cutting through the tension like knives. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a spectacle. But Amara's calm demeanor only seemed to unnerve the store employees further, as if they couldn't comprehend why she wasn't panicking like an ordinary person might. To understand why Amara Cole remained so composed in the face of such public humiliation, you first need to know who she was. Amara wasn't just wealthy. She was a trailblazer. Born and raised in Oakland, California, she had grown up in a modest household where her parents juggled multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. Her mother, a school teacher, instilled in her a love of learning, while her father, a machinist, taught her the value of hard work and resilience. Amara excelled academically, earning a full scholarship to Stanford University, where she studied computer science. By her mid-20s, she had co-founded a tech company that would revolutionize artificial intelligence in healthcare, making diagnostic tools more accessible and affordable for underserved communities. Her success was meteoric, but she never let it cloud her values. For Amara, money was never the end goal. It was a means to give back. Over the years, she had become a quiet force in philanthropy. Her foundation had rebuilt schools in low-income neighborhoods, funded scholarships for students of color in STEM fields, and created housing programs for single mothers. She didn't flaunt her wealth, she invested it where it mattered most. Amara was a firm believer in leading by example, and she preferred to remain behind the scenes. Her preference for privacy extended to her personal life. While her peers drove flashy cars and flaunted designer wardrobes, Amara opted for understated elegance. She often wore tailored suits in neutral tones and rarely accessorized beyond a simple watch and earrings. It wasn't unusual for her to be mistaken for a business professional rather than a billionaire, and that was exactly how she liked it. But this approach to blending in had its drawbacks. Her low profile often led people to underestimate her, to see her as just another face in the crowd. She was aware of this, but she had never thought it would become a liability, until today. As Amara stood in the supermarket, facing a growing crowd of onlookers and the unwarranted scrutiny of the store employees, she couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Here she was, a woman who had poured millions into community programs, being treated like a common thief over a bottle of olive oil. It was almost laughable, almost. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the police. 2 officers walked in, their expressions unreadable, but their presence commanding attention. The chatter among the shoppers died down as everyone turned to watch. The employees quickly pointed Amara out, and the officers made their way toward her. Amara's heart rate quickened, but she refused to let it show. She had faced boardrooms full of skeptical investors, defended her ideas against some of the sharpest minds in tech, and navigated the complexities of international philanthropy. She could handle this. One of the officers, a tall man with a stern expression, addressed her. "Ma'am, we've received a report of shoplifting. Can you step outside with us?" Amara met his gaze, her voice steady. "I haven't done anything wrong. I was planning to pay for everything in my cart. There's been a misunderstanding." The officer glanced at the store employees, who nodded emphatically. "We'll sort this out outside," he said, his tone leaving little room for argument. Amara could feel the weight of the crowd's stares as the officers guided her toward the exit. People whispered and pointed, their eyes filled with curiosity, judgment, and, in some cases, pity. She held her head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her falter. As she stepped into the parking lot, flanked by the officers, she couldn't help but think about the layers of injustice unfolding before her. This wasn't just about her. It was about the assumptions people made based on appearances, the rush to judgment that so often led to harm. But Amara wasn't one to back down, and even as the situation escalated, she knew this moment could become something much bigger than herself. Outside in the parking lot, the tension thickened. The officers guided Amara to a patrol car, while the store manager, now emboldened by their presence, followed closely behind. "We caught her red-handed," the manager declared, his voice dripping with authority. "The olive oil was clearly not scanned, and she refused to cooperate when we questioned her." Amara turned to face him, her calm exterior unwavering. "I wasn't refusing to cooperate," she said. "I was explaining that I hadn't checked out yet. Everything in my cart was intended to be paid for." But her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The officers glanced at the manager, then back at Amara. One of them, a younger officer who looked like he was fresh out of the academy, seemed hesitant. His partner, however, appeared more convinced by the manager's story. "We'll need to see some ID," the older officer said firmly. Amara reached into her pocket and handed over her driver's license without a word. The younger officer took it and studied it for a moment. There was no flicker of recognition in his eyes, just procedural indifference. He handed the ID to his partner, who took a cursory glance before tucking it into his pocket. "Ma'am, we're going to have to detain you while we investigate this further," the older officer said. "Please turn around." Amara's breath caught for just a moment. Detained? For what? She felt a flicker of disbelief, but she quickly pushed it down. This wasn't the first time she'd faced unfair treatment, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. Still, the sheer absurdity of the situation was hard to process. Detain me? She asked, her voice calm but pointed. On what grounds? Ma'am, let's not make this difficult, the officer replied. Just follow our instructions, and we'll get this sorted out. Amara sighed, realizing that arguing in this moment would only make things worse. She turned around as instructed, her movements deliberate and composed. The officer reached for his cuffs, and as the cold metal clicked around her wrists, a wave of murmurs erupted from the small crowd of onlookers that had gathered near the store entrance. Among them was a young woman holding up her phone, recording the entire incident. Her eyes locked with Amara's for a brief moment, and there was something in her gaze, sympathy perhaps, or maybe outrage. Amara couldn't tell, but she appreciated it nonetheless. Someone was documenting this, and that mattered. As the officers led her toward the patrol car, the younger officer hesitated. "Are we sure this is necessary?" he asked his partner quietly. "It's protocol," the older officer replied without looking at him. Amara climbed into the back seat of the patrol car, her hands cuffed in front of her. She leaned back against the seat, the weight of the situation settling over her. Through the window, she could see the young woman still filming, her phone pointed squarely at the car. The ride to the station was silent, save for the crackle of the police radio. Amara stared out the window, her mind racing. She thought about the years she had spent building her reputation, the countless hours dedicated to improving the lives of others. And now, here she was, sitting in the back of a patrol car, treated like a criminal over an item she hadn't even had the chance to pay for. When they arrived at the station, the officers escorted her inside. The air was cool and sterile, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Amara was led to a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. The younger officer gestured for her to sit. "We'll be right back," he said, his voice softer than it had been earlier. Amara nodded silently, watching as the door closed behind them. She sat alone in the room, her mind oscillating between frustration and determination. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been judged unfairly, who had been treated as guilty until proven innocent. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, the door opened and the officers returned. The older one carried a stack of papers, while the younger one looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the footage from the store," the older officer began. "It seems there was indeed a mistake. You didn't attempt to steal anything. We apologize for the misunderstanding." Amara raised an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding?" she repeated, her tone sharp. "I was accused, humiliated, handcuffed, and brought here over a so-called misunderstanding." The officers exchanged glances, but before they could respond, the younger one spoke up. "We're very sorry, ma'am. You're free to go." Amara stood, her movements deliberate. She looked them both in the eye, her gaze steady. "This isn't over," she said simply. "Not for me, and not for the countless others who go through this same kind of treatment every day." But as Amara walked out of the station, she wasn't just thinking about her own experience. She was already planning her next move, a way to turn this humiliation into something far more meaningful. By the time Amara stepped out of the police station, the video of her arrest had already started to spread online. The young woman from the supermarket had posted it to social media with a caption that read, "This woman was accused of stealing without even checking out, and look how they treated her." The clip captured the moment the officers handcuffed Amara, along with the crowd's murmurs of disapproval. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times, reaching audiences far beyond Palo Alto. At first, Amara tried to return to her day, but it wasn't long before her phone buzzed incessantly with messages. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers were reaching out, expressing outrage and support. The hashtags, #Justice for Amara and #Bias in Action, began trending on social media, drawing attention to the incident. Amara didn't want the narrative to spiral out of control. She understood the power of perception, both as a businesswoman and as a person of influence. So she issued a statement on her official social media accounts. Today, I experienced firsthand what many people endure daily, being judged and mistreated based on assumptions. While I am grateful for the overwhelming support, this isn't just about me. It's about addressing systemic biases that harm countless individuals. I plan to take action, not just for myself, but for those whose voices often go unheard. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of people shared their own stories of being wrongly accused or profiled. The comments section became a space for solidarity, but also for reflection. Amara's words resonated deeply, and her decision to focus on the bigger picture instead of personal vengeance elevated the conversation. Meanwhile, back at the supermarket, the store's management scrambled to contain the fallout. The video had put them under a glaring spotlight, and public backlash was swift. Protesters gathered outside the store, holding signs that read, "Accountability now" and "Stop the bias." Local news stations picked up the story, amplifying its reach. The store manager, whose accusatory words had been captured on video, issued a public apology. "We deeply regret the incident involving Ms. Cole," the statement read. "We are committed to reviewing our policies and providing additional training to ensure this does not happen again." But Amara wasn't satisfied with a generic apology. She arranged a meeting with the store's corporate leadership, presenting them with a proposal to implement comprehensive anti-bias training for their staff. She also pushed for transparency in their hiring and management practices, arguing that diversity and education were key to preventing similar incidents in the future. The police department faced its own reckoning. The video of Amara's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the officer's heavy-handed approach, sparking debates about the misuse of authority. Activists called for mandatory training on de-escalation and implicit bias for law enforcement officers. Amara, once again, found herself at the forefront of these conversations, using her platform to advocate for meaningful change. Despite the chaos swirling around her, Amara remained composed. She wasn't interested in lawsuits or public feuds. She wanted lasting reform. To her, the incident was a catalyst, a painful but necessary reminder of the work that still needed to be done. 1 week after the incident, Amara hosted a press conference outside her foundation's headquarters. The gathered reporters buzzed with anticipation, their cameras trained on her as she stepped up to the podium. Dressed in a sleek black suit, she exuded the quiet confidence that had become her hallmark. "I've spent my career building tools to improve lives," she began, her voice steady and resolute. "But technology alone can't fix the biases that are ingrained in our systems and our minds. That requires education, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths." She went on to announce the launch of a new initiative through her foundation, Project Equity. The program would focus on training retail employees, law enforcement, and other public-facing professionals to recognize and address implicit bias. It would also provide resources for individuals who had been unfairly targeted, offering legal support and advocacy. "This is about more than one incident," she concluded. "It's about creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look, where they come from, or what assumptions others may make about them." The crowd erupted in applause, and Amara felt a sense of purpose swell within her. She hadn't chosen this battle, but now that it was before her, she was determined to see it through. But even as Amara began to turn the tide, she knew this was only the beginning. Real change would take time, effort, and the collective will of a society ready to do better. In the weeks following the incident, Project Equity gained momentum faster than anyone anticipated. Donations poured in from supporters around the country, from ordinary citizens to CEOs who wanted to align themselves with the cause. Amara's name was now synonymous with more than just technological innovation. It was tied to a growing movement for fairness and accountability. But for Amara, the true victory wasn't in the donations or the headlines. It was in the stories she began to hear from people who felt seen and validated for the first time. A teacher from Cleveland shared how she had been accused of shoplifting years ago and how it had left a permanent mark on her sense of self-worth. A young man in Arizona recounted his wrongful arrest and how it had derailed his college plans. These were the voices that fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. Amara also began visiting schools and community centers, speaking directly to young people about the importance of standing up for justice. Not just when it affects them, but whenever they witness someone being treated unfairly. Change doesn't start in courtrooms or corporate boardrooms, she told them. It starts in our everyday lives, in the choices we make and the actions we take when no one else is watching. Her humility and authenticity struck a chord. She wasn't just a billionaire giving lectures from a podium. She was someone who had experienced injustice firsthand and was using her resources to fight back. And in doing so, she inspired others to take action in their own ways. Meanwhile, the supermarket chain announced sweeping changes to its policies. They committed to mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, beginning with the store where the incident had taken place. The local police department followed suit, launching a review of its procedures and pledging to implement better de-escalation tactics. These were small steps, but they represented a shift, a recognition that things couldn't continue as they were. For Amara, though, the most poignant moment came during a private conversation with the young woman who had filmed the incident. They met at a coffee shop not far from the supermarket, and as they sat down, the woman, whose name was Tasha, looked nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you," Tasha said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know who you were at the time, but I could tell what was happening wasn't right. I didn't think my video would make such a difference." Amara smiled warmly. "You stood up in the way you could, and that mattered," she replied. "Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel big in the moment, but it can create ripples you don't even see." Their conversation lasted over an hour, and by the end, Tasha left feeling empowered. Amara saw herself in the young woman, a spark of courage that, with the right support, could ignite meaningful change. As Amara reflected on everything that had happened, she realized that the incident at the supermarket had become more than just a personal ordeal. It was a mirror reflecting society's flaws, but also its potential for growth. It had reminded her, and countless others, that no one is too small to make a difference, and no one is too powerful to escape accountability. Before concluding, Amara took one last step to ensure the movement's message lived on. She worked with her team to produce a short film about her experience, blending her story with those of others who had faced similar injustices. The film premiered online, and within days, it garnered millions of views. It wasn't just a recounting of events, it was a call to action. The final words of the film were spoken by Amara herself. "We live in a world where judgment can be as quick as a glance, and assumptions can carry the weight of truth. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can choose to see each other for who we truly are. And that starts with you. Speak up. Act. Be the change." The screen faded to black, leaving viewers with a simple but powerful message. What will you do to make the world better? And so, as Amara's journey continued, her story became a reminder that in moments of injustice, there lies an opportunity to inspire change, no matter who you are. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it, discuss it, and reflect on how you can make a difference in your own life and community. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge, inspire, and call us to action. Together we can build a world where justice isn't the exception, it's the rule.